Hi there, this is Scott Wilkinson from .NETnuclear.com. Today we are discussing how to develop a module for Evoq Social that integrates with the game mechanics and some of the other social features. This video training is based on a session that I did for the DNNCon conference in West Palm Beach, Florida on October 19th. All the code that we are discussing is available on Codeplex, and you can get it by going to the URL that I'm going to show on the screen, and I'll also show it at the end. So the first thing we're going to discuss is what is Evoq Social. Evoq Social, or the DNN Social, consists of the DNN platform, the social extensions like the ideas, the question and answer, the discussions, the social events, all those different modules. And then we have the social APIs. The .NET Nuke mechanics has a lot of the API functionality for the gaming mechanics, and then the .NET Nuke social library. Some other commercial features are also included in Evoq Social, such as like the Google Analytics Pro, the advanced search crawling. The most recent version of DNN Social at this time is 1.1.1, so it has its own version number, which is probably based on the DNN platform 7.1.1. So the other question a lot of people ask is, where can you get Evoq Social? Because it's not something you can readily download like the DNN platform. Well, there's a couple ways. The way I did it was by getting a not-for-resale license, an NFR license, through my partnership with Bluebolt Solutions, which is a gold partner. So I'm using a development copy on my machine of their NFR license because I'm working for them. The other way to do it, of course, is to purchase it. Or you can get a 14-day trial on their cloud services. The only problem with that is you can't run it locally. So what makes a module gamified? Well, really it's the first point up here. It integrates with the game mechanics API, which is in that .NET Nuke mechanics assembly for scoring badges and privileges. But some of the other features that I think users will expect from a module that's developed for Evoq Social are that it participates in the activity stream journal logging. It utilizes the notifications framework for user alerts and custom actions. And optionally, it'll use content items to store the module data. All these items will be covered under this module project that we are going to look at in this video. So now let's do a demo of this social invite register module that I developed that shows off all the features of the game mechanics. I'm going to turn to my browser here where I have Evoq Social running locally. I'm going to log in as a user. And I'm going to go to his profile. So notice at the very beginning this user has 11 points. And then I'm going to go to our custom module that I'm going to show. It's in this invite link here. And what this module does is it allows a user to send an invitation to join this website. So basically you fill in the email address and a little note. It sends an email out to one or more people that you invite, and then they can come in and register for the website through that invitation link. But the thing that makes this a social module is that you get points along the way. So let me invite a user. Okay, and it says that email was sent, and it shows down here, this is a listing of sent invitations. Now I'm going to go back to my profile. I just got an email. I'll go back to my profile. Notice now I have 12 points. It used to be 11 points. So a point was added, and in my activity feed, it shows a message saying that I sent an invitation to this user and I earned 1 point. Now what I'm going to do is switch to my other browser and see if I got that email. Here it is. And it's not very pretty, but here's the link. And I'm now going to register. So after I register, I'm going to flip back to my other profile, John, who invited this user, and I'm going to refresh his profile again. Now you notice he has 14 points, so his score got incremented 2 points. And he has another message in his activity stream saying, a new user joined from the invitation you sent. You earned 2 points. In my notifications, in my drop down here for my profile, I also received a notification, which is denoted here. I'm going to click on that. And here's the notification. It says your invited guest has joined, and you can now friend this user and add them to your inner circle. So there's a link here to request friend. I'm going to click that, and it says it performed the action successfully. So what it did was it sent a friend request to that new user. Now I'm going to flip back to my other browser that has my new user logged in, and I'm going to look, and here he has a notification. I'll click on that, and then the notification says that John wants to be friends. Accept or dismiss, and I'll click accept. And now it shows that I have a friend, and if I flip back to John's profile and refresh, it shows now we're friends. What you just saw in the demo illustrates those three main features of the DNN social integration, which is the game mechanics for the scoring, the activity stream entries, and the notifications, and also the custom actions on those notifications. So we're going to look at now how that's all built out. Now this video is a more advanced module development video, so I'm not going to go into the basics of setting up your module development environment and the DNN manifest and all that kind of stuff. I have a lot of different basic videos you can go look at on .NETnuclear.com or on DNN Hero. So the first thing I want to talk about with this module is the installation. So a couple unique things that we're going to do for a Evoq social module is, number one, and this is kind of optional, but I think it's a good idea, is restrict the module to install only on Evoq social so that it won't install on other DNN installations like the basic DNN platform. The reason for this is if we're referencing the mechanics library features, it's going to break on any other DNN installation. So the way I did that is something I kind of discovered while I was developing this. There's a section in the manifest for dependencies, and those of you who have done module development have probably seen that first line that's in here for the core version dependency, which basically tells the installation of DNN, check the version that you're installing on. If it's greater than or equal to the version specified here, then let it go or let it continue. Otherwise, stop the installation and inform the user that they can't install it. So a lot of people are familiar with that. That's been in the manifest for some time now. But another lesser known check you can do in the manifest and the installation is do a type dependency check. And what this is it's checking to see if a type is in the current installation of DNN. And so what I do here is I pick a namespace and a random type. In this case, I'm using the .NET Nuke Mechanics entities badge. I just picked that at random, but it's a type that's only in the mechanics library, which only comes with DNN social. This dependency check, if this is not Evoq social, then this will fail and the module won't install. So this is just a kind of an easy way to prevent users from installing this on DNN versions that they shouldn't be installing it on. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to register some of our social items in the iUpgradable event. If you're not familiar with iUpgradable, this is an event that gets called during the installation. It's called from your business controller class as long as you implement the interface. And what it does is it's a one-time, event that occurs during the installation. Typically, module developers will use the iUpgradable event to do things like licensing checks, like hitting a web service to check for the license, verification. But we'll also use that to register our scoring definitions, our notification types, our content types, subscription types, all these one-time definitions that we need to insert when we first install the module. Once that's done, we never have to do it again. So like I said, once our module's installed, the code in iUpgradable registers the scoring actions in the game mechanics admin. From there, administrators can can set the point values for users that perform the action and any of the limits. Let's take a look at that really quick. First of all, I'm going to show you in the code this in my controller class. I'm implementing iUpgradable, and I've implemented the method upgrade module. And there's several lines of code here, and these are what adds the scoring definitions. So this line of code here is my add scoring definitions and add notification types. These are the type of things that we're going to do one time. What those scoring definitions are is we'll flip back over to our browser. I'm logged in as the host in our Evoq Social, and if you go to Admin, Advanced, and Game Mechanics, you can see these scoring definitions that were added when I first installed this module. These are all of the scoring definitions for every module on this instance or on this portal. You can filter them by module. So as you can see, this is my social invite module, and you can see there's two scoring event definitions. One is invitation sent, the other is invitation used. I can assign as an admin what reputation points I will give if the user performs that action within that module. Again, these are first registered when my module is installed, and when it's first installed, you can set these point values to 0 and then let the admin adjust them as needed. If you remember in our demo, the invitation sent gave me 1 point, but when the invitation was used, in other words, the invitation that I sent to the user ended up registering as a result of that invitation, then I got 2 points. Okay, so let's move on to the coding. And the first thing is to create the invitation. Now, in this module, there's a lot of different patterns and techniques going on in here. For example, the MVP pattern for some of the registration stuff, the web API services, some knockout. So there's a lot going on here. And I have, if you're not familiar with some of these techniques, I'm gonna have links on my blog page that's accompanying this video on .NETnuclear.com. And I'll have links to some other videos that I've done for explanations of, web API services, knockout, and MVP tutorials. So creating an invitation, it's the architecture around that invite view that you saw it's a web API service and knockout and Ajax that sends the information to that service. So it is in invite controller.send invitations. And the 5 steps that it does in the code is it creates a registration code and the email template. It sends the invitation email. It persists the invitation information in a content item. It adds a scoring action for that invitation sent definition, and then it adds the journal entry. So let's take a look at that in the code. So where we're going to see that is it's going to be the invite view is where all the knockout code is going to be, but all the magic happens in the service, which is in this services folder here, and it's going to be in this invite controller. So the invite controller is going to have this send invitations service method, and let's go through those 5 steps and see how this works. So we start up here by declaring some things. We do a loop. I didn't show you, but this allows users to input multiple email addresses. So we're looping through each email one at a time. So here's where it happens. First, we check to see if there's a duplicate invite. So it's kind of a DAL method here. And here's where we create the registration code that's unique. I'm just using this, creating a GUID for it. Then I'm creating the link, I'm creating the email body, and here's where I'm sending the email to the user using the .NET Nuke send email. Not the best way to do it. A better way would be to probably queue it up, but you know, you can add on to this if you want. It's all open source. The next thing that happens is I record to the database the invitation. So I'm using this DAL method, which is, I think this is really a facade to creating a content item here. So I create this invite and as a content item. And actually, if you're not familiar with using content items as your data access layer, I've got a video on DNN Hero on data access where I cover all the different techniques for data access, which is, DAL, the DAL2, entity framework, and content items. So after I record it to the database, here's where we do the scoring. And so here's where I'll talk about this a little more. There's in the game mechanics API, there's a log user activity. It's kind of a strange way of putting it. This is how we're actually going to assign points to the user by logging this activity. So what is this activity? Well, I've created constants for the scoring definitions, and this is definitions. This is one of the actions here, the invitation sent, and I'm passing it into this method that's a wrapper around the .NET Nuke log user activity. I'm passing in the current user ID, the portal ID, and the invite ID, which is a content item ID that I just created up here. What that will do is it will either, if it doesn't find this invitation or this action, like there's not a definition for it, this will return null or a 0. Otherwise, what will happen is it will log the activity, and that happens in two ways. It logs it into this table of all these scoring activities, and it also will increment the score based on whatever the game mechanics admin shows as the points related to this action. The unfortunate thing is when this happens, we in our code don't know how many points were actually allocated to that user, because what this does is just returns a log ID. So this is kind of goofy. That's why I have this piece of code here where it says, okay, if our log ID is greater than 0, in other words, we were able to find an action definition and there were points associated with that, then we created this log ID. Then I have to go and get that scoring action. So I got to make another call to actually get the last scoring action. Will give me the points that were allocated to it in an object. And if that comes back, then I can assign it to this to my response object. Then what I do is I add the task to the journal. The journal is the activity stream. So this add task is actually adding what I call a log to the stream, which shows that the user that, hey, this is what you just did, and it also tells the user how many points they earned. So after we're all done with that, we return from this method and return to our front end a list of the user invites so that it can update the user front end. So now that the invitation's been created, the next step would be to look at the registration and notification part of this. If you didn't notice before, this module package actually consists of two module definitions. One is the invitation module, and the other is the registration module. And the way I configured that is the registration module got put on a custom registration page, which then got configured in my portal to be the registration page for this site. This registration view is using my MVP pattern. So a lot of the code that happens for this for the registration is in the register view, which is the form information. The clicking of the submit button creates the user by offloading it to the register presenter, which in a method or event called register user. So the 6 things that happen here are: number 1, we take that information from the form, from the view, and we create a new user in the portal. We then look up the invite based on the code. So we basically look up in the DAO layer with the code that was given, and we look up that code should be unique, and we look up the invitation that it came from. The reason we do that is because we need to know the user that it came from, so we can do number 3, which is add the scoring action for the invitation used definition, because John, our user who sent the invitation, is the user who will get the points. Then we send a notification to that inviter user, which is John, and that notification is the one that says that your invitation was used and a new user registered as a result. Then we're going to add a journal entry to show the same thing. And then number 6 is we're going to update the invite with the recipient's user ID. What this is for is because that invite, when we update it with the new user ID that registered, the next time John goes back to his invite screen, it'll show that invitation that was logged that he sent. It'll show that it's been used, and it'll update it with the user information. So it's kind of a nice little touch. Let's look at that in the code. Okay, so the view for this is going to be the interface for the view is the register view, and it's this register user control. That's just that typical registration form here. When they click the button, everything's going to go, like I said, since it's written in the MVP pattern, it's going to allocate this to the register presenter. And the register presenter, that event that gets invoked, is the register user right here. Let's look at those 6 steps here. First step, create the user. So this is just using a library that I wrote called DNN membership utilities, and it's a create user using the DNN API to create a user. If you've ever written a custom authentication provider for DNN, it's that kind of code right there. Then the next, here's where we look up the invitation code. We get the invite code from our view, which got it from the query string when the user clicked on the link. And here's where in my DAO method, I'm going to get the invite, and hopefully what it returns is that invite object. Check to see if it's not null. And then here's where I add the user scoring action. Same code like we did before in the invite, only we're calling it the log user activity with the invitation used. We're passing all the information here. Again, if that resulted in a successful allocation of points, we'll get a log ID. We'll check that, and then unfortunately we have to do this code again, where we then go get what's the scoring action, what is the points value for that, and we get that back in an object, and then we can assign it to a variable so that we can do something with it. Then we send a notification to the invite user. So this goes back to John. He's the inviter, and this is the notification that basically says, your user has registered. And then we add the same kind of thing for the journal entry. So John gets a thing in his activity stream that says the invitation was used, how many points he earned, that kind of thing. Then we update the invitation with the recipient's user ID. And this is so that it updates in the view. So when John goes back to his invite module, it shows now the information about that user instead of that blank panel. And then we've finished the invitation or the registration process. So now that new user is registered and John got his journal entries and his notifications sent, we're still not done yet, because there's an interesting piece I want to dig into, and that is that part about the adding the friend. That's actually a custom notification action. And so we're going to be talking about those custom notification actions, what's really cool about those is you can create any kind of, for one thing, you can create those notifications, which is neat. You can create notifications to either an individual user or to a group of users in a role or in a group, which is very cool. It notifies them by adding that notification alert on their user widget, but also those custom actions. So when you notice when you saw the alert, there was that request friend link, which is a custom action link. You can create those, any type of custom action you want, and have it perform any kind of custom, back-end process that you want to. So in this case, I created a custom action on that notification that allowed the user to create the friendship. And when they clicked the link, it hit a web API service that was custom to my module that performed that request friend. So let's see how that works. We're going to look at the web API service, and it's in this notification controller request friend. But I'm going to show you a little bit about how, even before that, how we register that custom notification action, which was part of, again, what we talked about before, that iUpgradable event. That's where we registered this custom action and we defined it. And then we'll go through the three things that happen when you do a request friend. We retrieve the invitation ID, which is a content item ID, from the notification context. You can actually send any piece of information in that notification context, even a JSON string, and you can parse it or deserialize it how you need. Then we're going to verify that invitation object and get the recipient and invite user. So we need to know both the inviter, which was the John, and then the invitee, which was me, who got the invite. And then we're going to create that friend request. So let's take a look at that in the code. So the first thing I want to do is go back to our controller, our business controller, in this upgradable event, and let's look at that this notification type. So I'm going to dig into this method right here. Well, it's actually an interface. One thing I also wanted to say is under components in the integration folder, you'll find all sorts of useful classes that you can actually use in your code. For every piece of the DNN API that you'd probably be interested, the mechanics, the content items, journal entry, notifications and subscriptions, and even taxonomy terms. All these things are available to you to use, and they're wrappers around the DNN API, and it's a great way of getting all this functionality ready to go for your module. Also, one thing to note is how a lot of these things work are using a kind of a dependency injection framework. So if you see something like this, I'll give you an example. You have iMechanics, which is an interface. You have a mechanics CS, and then you have a mechanics impl CS. So you'll see these three classes that are named very similar. And what it is you have iMechanics is your interface for this controller class. The mechanics impl is the controller implementation of that interface, and this mechanics CS is this factory or this service. What do you call it? Well, it's a service locator pattern, but it's essentially just a dependency injection. So this allows me to call it, if you remember in my code, any kind of mechanics controller method is just mechanics.instance, which is this factory thing, and then the method, which will be all part of this implementation. So just a little background of how some of this works, so you know how to use it. Anyway, so let's go back to our notifications, and I'll go to the notifications impl. It's in the add notification type, which is the method run from our iUpgradable event. And this is where we're going to register our notification type. Now this first part is just about the actual notification type, which is this is an invitation used notification type. Here's a description for it, and then the desktop module ID, which is referring to the module that's producing this invitation. So that's the type. Not very interesting. The cool part is this optional thing here that I'm doing is I'm registering this notification type action. And this is what gives me a one or more. You can register multiple of them. So this actions is actually adding a collection of them. In this case, I'm only creating one custom action. I give it a resource key, which refers to, I'll have this in my shared resource file here somewhere. One of these, yeah, probably in this shared resource file here. So this allows me to have this internationalized version of the name of this, the name of the action, and then the description that gets put, which is actually the text on the link. And then here's where the magic is. This API call is the REST call for the link. So when a user clicks on that link, it's expecting a web API, a DNN framework service call to some sort of controller method. And so notice that this is using the familiar, if you're not familiar with this, I have a really good tutorial on DNN Hero and also on my website for web API. But this is the URL to our controller action and our route. Let's look at this. So API notification friend, and we're going to go and look at that controller and see how that's hooked up. Again, back on services, I have my. If you look at the URL, you can tell that it's using the notification controller, which is my notification controller, and a friend controller action. So let's look at this notification controller and we'll find an action called friend. So this is the one that's going to be invoked. For these types of subscription actions, we're going to use a notification DTO. This is what's going to be passed into it. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to call this one line to get this notification object. So we're going to get the notification ID and get this notification object. And then what we're going to do is we're going to parse this notification context. What this is when we created this notification, which was in the register presenter, we created, let me go back there because that's a really key thing here. So in this register presenter, when we invoked this, I'm going to the interface, and now I'm going to the implementation here. Notification impl, here we go. And what was this method? This send use notification. So when we created this notification here, in this context, this is a very important piece of the notification. The rest of the notification almost looks like an email. You got a subject line and a body and all that stuff. But this context, we're putting the invite ID in it, and it's just a string. And so when we go back to our notification controller here, this is what we're going to parse out of it. We're going to basically, all I'm doing to parse this is creating an integer out of it, and that's going to be our invitation ID. And so now that I've parsed it, I have an invitation ID. I'm going to then I newed up my repository to get my so I can get my DAL method here, get the invite, which is just returning an invitation object with that invitation ID. And here is where I can now do my friend stuff. Now that I have the notification object, I know the portal that it was created from, I know the invited user, and I know the invite or the recipient user. So I get the user information for the invited user, I get the user information for the recipient user, and then I call the friends controller add friend method to create that friend request. Again, this is all part of friends controller is, actually this is the .NET Nuke social API to do this. I'm just passing these two users and this add friend method, and that just creates the friend request. Then what we do is we return a success to this method return, and then we can also do this delete notification. So what that did was when you clicked it, if you remember, it performed the action and it popped that notification off of the user's notification stack. So just basically gets rid of it and says you're done with it. So that's a really, really cool and really powerful feature. You can use it for lots of different things. Well, that wraps up this tutorial on this DNN social and gamified module. These are two pertinent links on the screen here. The link to the Codeplex project for the module, so you can get all the code. It's free and open source, and I'd love for you to, if you want to contribute to it, that'd be awesome. Also, the module template that I built it from is my own. It's my .NET Nuclear MVP DAL2 template. Again, that one is on Codeplex and it's free and open source. I will also have a companion article, like I mentioned before, where with this video, where I'll have not only these links, but also some links to some other videos. If some of the material that I covered goes a little bit over your head or you're not familiar with it, I've covered a lot of that those topics in other videos, both on DNN Hero and on my website. And finally, I'd just like to thank the sponsors and then especially the organizers of the DNNCon West Palm Beach conference, mainly to Arrow for organizing it, and also thank Blue Bolt for which is my gold partner that I work for, who I've been doing this social development for. And I want to thank you guys for watching this video, and please attend future conferences and you'll be sure to see me there. Thanks.